Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our four-part video series in collaboration with Apex Logistics. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, and each episode I'll be joined by a different leader at Apex to talk about four of their key verticals, the challenges thrown up by COVID, and what the future might bring. Last episode, I was joined by Greg Zimmer at Apex to talk all about health and pharma, the challenges COVID has thrown up and the weaknesses it's highlighted, how the industry can look to move forward from the crisis, and exactly how Apex are keeping their customers moving with solutions that other brands simply do not have. And today, in episode 3, we'll be focusing on high technology. I'm joined by Jeremy Mueller, Vice President of Corporate Sales at Apex Logistics, to talk about the challenges and the changes around the pandemic, the impact on supply chain transformation mindset, how the industry is adapting for the future, and exactly how Apex is helping their customers to scale and adapt in a fast-paced and disruptive market. So we've been talking about two complex verticals so far, and the tech space is not going to let the side down. Another multifaceted industry that's undergone a lot of change and come up against plenty of obstacles over the last few years. So welcome, Jeremy. How are you today?
Doing well, Sarah, and thank you for this opportunity. We're focusing on a very important subject, right? Especially with consumer electronics, high tech, critical in the market and environment that we are in currently.
Absolutely. So share with us, what have those challenges been for Apex, specifically in this space and for your clients as well? Where were they at pre-COVID versus where are they now? What do those changes look like? Are they all negative? Do we have some positive?
Yeah, good question, Sarah. I mean, when we started this off, actually at the beginning of the pandemic, up until that point, the supply chain was, I would say, relatively smooth. Of course, as you know, many of our, I would say relatively, right? So
Right.
underscore that. The interesting aspect of that is many customers change their procurement, their supply chains to adapt to just in time. And what I mean by that is getting the goods to the consumer in time. And when you take that back to the production cycle and also the assembly of consumer high tech, all of the entire supply chain end to end was essentially on a just in time demand basis. With the impact of COVID, that changed the entire dynamics of the industry, right? So the challenges around that, especially with the procurement impact that COVID had at the start of the pandemic, and now cascading on into where we are today, it has been I would call it a rough journey. So
Mhm.
from fair stability to now contingency planning around what do we do, right? So that's where not only Apex as a service provider, the journey that we've taken, it correlates to our customers and the journey that our customers are undergoing currently.
Absolutely. Do you have any real life examples that you can kind of share of maybe a customer where they were pre-COVID versus where they are right now?
Sure. I mean, I'll use some examples without specific names attached to it, right? Because obviously we want to make sure that we are aware of non-disclosure.
Mhm.
Critical in our industry, especially with the impacts of the supply chain and the challenges around it. So a couple of examples is that, prior to the onset of the pandemic, consumer electronics was fairly available to the consumers, be it laptop devices or I would call it consumer electronics as it relates to the entertainment industry, like the Sony PlayStations and the
Mhm.
Xboxes, right? So, and when you overlay COVID to that, the impact that COVID has had, in terms of the supply chain. So from a relatively stable supply chain where goods were available to the consumers, now we're dealing with empty shelves. How do we replenish those products in just in time for the holiday season as we close up, as we get into Black Friday in the next few days? So it has been a significant impact to our customers. Our customers have had to change the way they manage the supply chain. And generally, much of the consumer electronics had a combination of motor transport being ocean freight and air freight. Air freight an absolute necessity as it relates to the new sales or new products coming on market, whereas replenishment goods was ocean freight. We find ourselves today in an interesting mix because you can't get anything through the ports, or the ports are congested. It actually started in March this year with the grounding of the vessel Ever Given in the Suez Canal that impacted about 300 vessels that couldn't get through the Suez Canal because of the grounding of that vessel. Now that happened in March, and then you push this forward 6-7 months as it is today. We can see the impact the supply chain and the ocean freight is causing as it relates to the ports of Long Beach, LA, and all of the ports correlated to the US West Coast. Right? Those
Absolutely.
yeah.
So many
So
things.
yeah, there's a multitude of factors that are playing into this, from the impact of COVID as it relates to our consumers.
Absolutely. And, resilience and agility across those challenges really are key, right? And as supply chain professionals, a lot of us, I think, have been a little surprised by just how many pain points COVID has really highlighted, right? So, do you think that COVID has actually given mindset around supply chain transformation maybe a boost? Are we more open and committed to change?
I think we are forced in a position of being that. If you notice, supply chain logistics was not a point of discussion uh, in general conversation.
Right.
Today, it's front and forward in news. What has happened to our supply chain? What's the impact it's causing to our customers? What's the impact it's causing to our own lives, especially in regards to, let alone consumer electronics? What's happened to our food supply? Right? Has that been impacted? You can see the inflationary trends that you're seeing currently as it relates to the impact of COVID, right? So
Yeah.
all of that is very critical in today's context of not only managing to COVID, but also trying to navigate through the current challenges that we have.
Yeah, it's so true. And, digitization, if it was a buzzword before, it is a word that everybody is using right now. Do you have kind of an example that you can share with us of maybe what you're doing internally or maybe a customer around supply chain transformation?
Sure. Much of it, I can speak for not only consumer electronics, but also what we call FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods. Um, Much of the data is more critical than the product, and I'm going to say that quite, putting myself out at limb, if I can call it that. Okay. If you don't know where your product is, your product is irrelevant.
Hmm.
Okay, so if I can put this in the context of a consumer, many of the consumers today go into a consumer environment, whether it's a big box retailer or go online, and they want to see that product made available to them on demand.
Hmm.
When they really find that the products are really back ordered, sometimes as far as 6 to 8 weeks, it becomes a challenge, because then how do you satisfy what the consumer needs? And Sarah, the challenge, as I said, is not only consumer electronics and high tech. It actually goes back to our basic needs.
Hmm.
And tying this up in terms of the digital world, as we call it, we execute supply chain not only by delivering a product or a solution. Our customers rely on us to provide them the data or the milestones of the product as it moves through the supply chain, so that they can manage forecasting and sales based on where their product is.
Absolutely. And I loved what you said there because a lot of what I'm reading about retailers right now is that they are competing on supply chains. They're no longer really competing on product. They're competing supply chain against supply chain and who can get those products in the hands of the consumers the fastest,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, for those listeners that are thinking, yes, I'm ready to move forward and embrace this next phase of my business journey, let's answer some of those most common questions for them. When they're looking to scale, how do they get additional capacity? Are there routing options using alternative gateways, for example, especially with all of the backlog that we're talking about in the ocean freight side?
The starting point, Sarah, is understanding where and when you're going to need capacity. And
Mhm.
that's the key factor of being able to forecast what your needs are. So if I can quantify this by saying that as a retailer, as a importer, whether it's high tech and more, I would say more prevalent to high tech, the faster you can get and the more in depth you can get to your production and your procurement, the more nimble and adaptable you can get in terms of forecasting what your transportation needs are going to be.
Hmm.
And if I can qualify that a couple of minutes or a couple of points to that is when you're manufacturing a product, you're manufacturing a product against a certain need or against a certain cycle of the equipment or the consumer electronics as we know it. And you're basing your production cycle based on the forecast of that product and that need. When you look at the transportation cycle or the transportation needs, it is actually closer to the consumer when you start shipping that product at that point in time. The critic how Apex actually leverages into this and to be able to help our customers out is taking that forecast and correlating that to the transportation needs
Hmm.
and the mode of transportation in terms of being able to fulfill that need of the customer. So we've got a significant opportunity here when you look at and a very important position in terms of logistics, because we are a full scale. Apex is a full scale ocean freight service provider, as well as an air freight service provider. So we got scheduled capacity, whether it's ocean freight or air freight. And how do we correlate that to our customers' needs? So we will take those forecasts, and based on what the customer has planned the mode of transportation to be, we would be able to leverage our capacity, whether it's ocean freight or air freight, to manage up to those opportunities in terms of managing their supply chain based on their needs and based on their delivery cycles to the consumer.
And it's so important. I mean, what we're really talking about here is partnering with your vendors, partnering with a freight forwarding company like Apex Logistics, and communication, right? The
Correct.
more you can plan, the more data and information that you can provide your partners, just means that everybody overall is going to be more successful. Let's talk
Correct.
about recovery. What's the deal with recovery and improving recovery times? Where are we at in high tech? What does that look like? Are we still kind of scrambling?
We are still scrambling, Sarah.
Mm.
We don't know right now what we're looking, what we are in terms of actual planning. at this point in time, yes, we're trying to salvage the holiday season 2021, right?
Mhm.
We're close upon it. Black Friday is 4 days away. When you look at beyond that, going into 2022, we also see Chinese New Year coming in, right?
Yes.
Which is end of end of January, early February. So many of the customers, many of our customers are looking at that range at this point in time. What how would Apex actually fit into being able to provide a continued supply chain for them as we look at the Chinese New Year shutdown? As we know, mainland China shutdowns for about 10 days, and then all of the other countries in Asia, it's anywhere between 2 days to a week of shutdown. How do you manage to that, right? I mean, we got right after that, here in North America, in most of Europe, we're then in the cycle of spring 2022. What are the needs going to be? How is the supply chain going to improve? Are the congestions in the ports going to improve? How long is that going to take? We've seen over the last week or so some changes in the port, or especially in the port of LA and Long Beach, where they say there's 33% release of containers that are full, that have been taken out or being taken out, released from the port for delivery to their customers. But we see a significant impact coming back with empty containers.
Mhm.
And that's causing another bottleneck or congestion with empty containers sitting in yards that simply don't have any space at all. So
Absolutely.
I would say we got to take this probably 3 months to 6 month from an outlook perspective, right? 3 months means, what do I need to do? Whom do I need to engage to secure my supply chain for the next 3 months? And then 6 months out, what would the world look like for, in the eyes of consumers, in the eyes of retailers, our customers, 6 months out?
Yeah, and I would take that even further. I mean, Costco just came out and said that they chartered 3 vessels until the end of 2022. And so that to me is a really good indication that we're still going to be taking 2022 as sort of recovery
Correct.
in international transportation. So
Correct.
you mentioned air freight. How does Apex support your customers with origin and destination services for direct bought flights? This is really, really important because this is a huge alternative, right? To
Correct.
all the turmoil that's happening in ocean freight for especially high tech companies.
Yeah. I would call this a vision of our leadership. So we at Apex, our leadership have traditionally, positioned the company to procure air freight capacity well in advance of the demand.
Mm,
So we know, and historically, the leaders of our company have really envisioned and driven the fact that we control quite a significant amount of capacity from Asia into the US and
mhm,
also into many other consumer areas globally. The the advantage we have as a company is that air freight is already procured. Now, what we find ourselves in, Sarah, is that whatever we procured in 2021 for this season is not enough to
mm,
satisfy our customers' demand. And that's also for us, when we look at it, it's an interesting position to be in, because many of our customers are coming back to us and saying, well, you promised us X amount of capacity, but we're going to need X times 3. And it's like, well, what do you want me to do? We can't manufacture the aircraft. We don't have control over the capacity that comes in the market. We've got to go out there and procure more capacity to satisfy that demand. What's happening in the industry is that's pushing up rates
mhm,
that I have been in this industry 23 years. I have never seen it at
mhm,
this level. Right. So ocean, to put this in the context of cost, ocean freight over the last several months, actually 6 months or longer, has gone up from about $4,000 to $30,000.
mhm.
air freight has gone from $4 a kilo to $24 a kilo. And that's
Wow.
a significant impact,
Hmm.
right? It's an impact. It's a very difficult sell. I empathize some of the customers in my position that have got to deliver the message of increased costs to their financial teams. That's a challenge.
Hmm.
Right. So overall, to be more direct in the response, the Apex has got a significant leverage in the market because of the fact that our leadership forethought this, planned for it, and secured the capacity that was required. And we continue to invest in our customers' needs by being able to scale up to their needs that have now increased three or four fold.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's look at the future. And, looking to the new normal, what has Apex learned from these last couple of turbulent years?
That's a very interesting question, Sarah. It is like looking through the crystal ball,
I know.
right? Yeah. Um, the we I think what we need to do, and I think this is relevant to where we are today. Our company actually regularly engages with our customers, and we do this on a more, I would say, a more consistent planned time frame, understanding what their needs are, taking that back home in terms of homework for us, planning for those needs and being able to deliver a solution to meet what their needs are. I think that's the mode of the future, right? It's a planning cycle and then the execution cycle once you lay out those plans.
Yeah. Yeah. So you learn from the past and you execute based on the data and information for the future. And so,
Correct.
how will Apex be a part of that? What changes are you making, and what will be your key areas of focus around this evolving tech space?
The tech space is very critical for us as a company. We got multiple customers in the high tech consumer electronics world. It is being adaptable to meet their needs. The ability to invest in supporting their needs, because it's critical that we as a service provider, Apex as a company, be able to do that. Critical to that is managing the cash flow for us,
Hmm.
very important
Yep.
in these days and times, and then correlating that to the execution part of it for on behalf of our customers, right? Whether it is providing the EDI integration that provides them visibility to their milestones and executing to what their supply chain needs are going to be.
Absolutely. So, when businesses are looking to scale and adapt in a truly disruptive technology market space, there are so many factors to consider, right? Accelerating production, time to market, and lead times to compete in this ever changing and interconnected digital economy. And knowing that there's a partner like Apex who can assess your business, architect, and implement strategies that transform your supply chain and support that all important resilience and sustainability is just incredible. It's been really interesting to do a deeper dive into this space, and I'm sure this will provide a lot of food for thought. A big thank you to Jeremy for joining me today and for giving us so much insight into the world of high tech and what Apex are doing to position their customers for growth. And don't forget to come back for the fourth and final episode in this series, where we'll be going to take a closer look at the industrial vertical. Another big space, so I can't wait for Apex to take us behind the scenes and tell us more. See you next time. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you, Sarah. Take care.